A cop sees a kid on the playground playing with poop and sand. He goes up to him and asks, "What are you doing, kid?" The kid says, "Making a policeman." The cop loses his mind, gives the kid a beating, and sends him home. The next day, the cop sees the same kid in the same spot playing with poop and sand. He asks, "What are you doing?" The kid says, "Making a priest." With a grin on his face, the cop asks, "Why aren't you making a policeman?" The kid says, "I tried, but there wasn't enough poop."
The teacher assigned her fifth graders to ask a parent to tell them a story with a moral. The next day, the kids shared the usual spilled milk and pennies saved tales until only Janie was left. "Janie, do you have a story?" the teacher asked. "Yes, ma'am. My daddy told me about Auntie Susie. She was a Marine pilot in Desert Storm. Her plane got hit and she bailed out over enemy territory with only a flask of whiskey, a pistol, and a survival knife. She drank the whiskey on the way down so the bottle wouldn't break. Her parachute landed her in the middle of 20 Iraqi troops. She shot 15 of them, then killed 4 more with the knife before the blade broke, and finished the last one with her bare hands." The teacher gasped, "Good heavens! What's the moral?" Janie grinned. "Stay away from my Auntie Susie when she's drunk."
A Japanese gentleman was visiting the United States for the first time. He'd seen America on television for years and was excited to finally experience it in person. On the last day of his trip, he climbed into a taxi and asked the driver to take him to the airport. As they drove along the highway, a Honda zoomed past the cab. The man leaned toward the window, clapped his hands, and exclaimed, "Ah, Honda, very fast, made in Japan." A few minutes later, a Toyota flew by. Again, he leaned out excitedly and said, "Toyota, very fast, made in Japan." Soon after that, a Mitsubishi sped past them. Once again, the man smiled proudly and shouted, "Mitsubishi, very fast, made in Japan." By now, the taxi driver was getting a little irritated, but he kept quiet and continued driving. Finally, they arrived at the airport. The driver stopped the car and said, "That'll be $300. The Japanese gentleman's eyes went wide. $300? That's very expensive. The taxi driver smiled and replied, "Meter, very fast, made in Japan."
An old Greek man and an old Italian man are arguing. The Greek man says, "Look, all I'm saying is that the Greeks invented everything the Romans get credit for." The Italian says, "Yes, maybe, but the Romans improved it and made it useful." The Greek man says, "We invented the democracy." The Italian says, "We realized the challenge of direct elections and the benefit of the legislature, and thus created the republic." The Greek man says, "Yes, but we created beautiful architecture like the Parthenon." The Italian says, "And we improved your building techniques and used them to create aqueducts and structures that stood for centuries longer." The Greek man, frustrated, finally says, "Ah, of course, but the Greeks, we invented sex." The Italian man says, "That may be true, but we introduced it to women."
Johnny found a worm and tried to push it into a wormhole. As it kept bending, it wouldn't go in. His grandpa was looking on and said, "If you can get the worm into the hole, I'll give you $1." Johnny thought for a minute and ran to the bathroom. He came back with a can of hairspray and sprayed the worm. It went stiff, upon which Johnny pushed it down the hole. Grandpa was impressed. The next day, Johnny woke up and outside was Grandpa with a dollar bill and a bike. Johnny asked, "You owed me $1, not a bike." Grandpa replied, "The dollar is from me, the bike is from Grandma." A fellow came into a bar and ordered a martini. Before drinking it, he removed the olive and carefully put it into a glass jar. Then he ordered another martini and did the same thing. After an hour, when he was full of martinis and the jar was full of olives, he staggered out. "Well," said a customer, "I never saw anything as peculiar as that." "What's so peculiar about it?" the bartender said. His wife sent him out for a jar of olives.
A young Arab boy asks his father, "What is that strange hat you are wearing?" The father said, "Why, my son, it is a chachilla. In the desert, it protects our heads from the intense heat of the sun." "And what is the long flowing robe you were wearing?" asked the boy. "Oh, my son," exclaimed the father, "it is very simple. This is a jalabiya. As I have told you, in the desert it is not only very hot, but the sand is always blowing. My jalabiya protects the entire body." The son then asked, "But father, what about those ugly shoes you have on your feet?" "These are babouches, my son," the father replied. "You must understand that although the desert sands are very beautiful, they are also extremely hot. These babouches keep us from burning our feet." "So tell me then," added the boy. "Yes, my son. Why are we living in Birmingham and still wearing all this shit?"
A man comes home to find his wife of 10 years packing her bags. "Where are you going?" demanded the surprised husband. "To Las Vegas. I found out that there are men who will pay me $500 cash to do what I do for you for free." The man pondered that thought for a moment, and then began packing his bags. "What do you think you're doing?" she screamed. "I'm going to Las Vegas with you. I want to see how you're going to live on $1,000 a year." "Honey, don't forget to buy bread when you come home from work and your girlfriend Valerie greets you." "Who is Valerie?" "Nobody. I just wanted you to answer, to have confirmation that you saw my text." "But I'm with Valerie right now." "Where are you, asshole?" "At the bakery." "I'm at the bakery. Where are you?" "I'm at work. Now that you're at the bakery, buy the bread." Maria had 3 children, Snowflake, Sand, and Brick. One day Snowflake goes to her mom and asks her, "Why am I called Snowflake?" Then the mother replies, "Because when you were born, a snowflake fell on your head." The next day goes Sand and asks, "Mom, why am I called Sand?" And the mother replies, "Because when you were born, a small grain of sand fell on your head." The next day goes Brick and asks, "Jip facts you feared bad." One day, a famous drunkard arrived to interview for a job. Eyes a little red, hair a little messy, but confidence skyrocketed. There was a dignified girl sitting in the interview room asking questions in a very serious manner. The girl asked the first question, "Do you drink alcohol?" The drunkard replied calmly, "Yes, I drink." Girl raises eyebrows. "How much do you drink?" The drunkard has spoken, "Just some 6 packs a day." The girl immediately took out the calculator or calculated it in her brain. "Oops, 6. How much does it cost?" Drunkard, "Understand, 1,000 rupees per day." The girl, "And since when have you been drinking?" The drunkard said proudly, "It's been 15 years. The girl smiled and said in a victorious way, "So with this calculation, you spend 30,000 a month and 360,000 rupees a year on alcohol, and about 600,000 rupees in 15 years. Do you know that you could buy a BMW for 400,000? The silence took over the room. Drunk looked at the girl from top to bottom and asked with great satisfaction, "Do you drink too?" The girl said slightly proudly, "Nope, I have never even touched my hands." The drunkard straightened the chair, smiled and said, "Good, show me your BMW then. Where does she stand?" A young couple was engaged in a most affectionate embrace when there came the sound of a key in the front door. The young lady broke away at once, eyes wide with alarm. "Heavens!" she cried. "It's my husband! Quick, jump out the window!" The young man, equally alarmed, made a quick step toward the window, then demurred. "I can't," he said. "We're on the 13th floor." "For heaven's sake!" cried the young lady in exasperation. "Is this a time to be superstitious?" One day, a woman walks into work in a short skirt. As she's walking to her desk, she gets stopped by a coworker who says, "Your hair smells really nice today." She grimaces and stomps into her manager's office. She says, "I want to file a sexual harassment complaint," and then relates what happened. The manager says, "What's wrong with him complimenting how your hair smells?" Furious, she snarls, "He's a midget." A retiring farmer, in preparation for selling his land, needed to rid his farm of animals. So he went to every house in his town. To the houses where the man is the boss, he gave a horse. To the houses where the woman is the boss, a chicken was given. He got toward the end of the street and saw a couple outside gardening. "Who's the boss around here?" he asked. "I am," said the man. "I have a black horse and a brown horse," the farmer said. "Which one would you like?" The man thought for a minute and said, "The black one." "No, no, no, get the brown one," the man's wife said. "Here's your chicken," said the farmer, and walks away. A guy rides his motorcycle through the border from Spain to France every week, carrying 2 bags of sand. The border guards searched the bags every time, but never found anything, so he had to let him through. The guard has his last day at work before retiring, and the guy comes to the border again, carrying his 2 bags of sand. The guard says, "Look, man, it's my last day. I'm not going to bust you. You've clearly been smuggling something across the border all this time, but we never find anything. What is it?" The guy says, "I'm smuggling motorcycles." A little silver-haired lady calls her neighbor and says, "Please come over here and help me. I have a killer jigsaw puzzle, and I can't figure out how to get started." Her neighbor asks, "What is it supposed to be when it's finished?" The little silver-haired lady says, "According to the picture on the box, it's a rooster." Her neighbor decides to go over and help with the puzzle. She lets him in and shows him where she has the puzzle spread all over the table. He studies the pieces for a moment, then looks at the box, then turns to her and says, "First of all, no matter what we do, we're not going to be able to assemble these pieces into anything resembling a rooster." He takes her hand and says, "Secondly, I want you to relax. Let's have a nice cup of tea. And then," he said with a deep sigh, "let's put all the cornflakes back in the box." A pirate walked into a bar. He had a wooden leg, an eye patch, and a hook for a hand. The bartender was curious. "How did you get that wooden leg?" he asked. The pirate took a swig of ale. "'Twas a terrible sea battle. I stood bravely, directly facing 12 cannons. All they managed to hit was my leg." The bartender said, "What about your hook?" The pirate took another long swig. "Arr, 'twas the day the British Navy caught me. They tied me to the mast. I escaped by gnawing my own hand off." The bartender was growing skeptical. "And how did you get that eye patch?" The pirate took another swig. "'Twas a mutiny. My own crew left me marooned on a desert island, but I had no fear. I lay down on the sand to wait to be rescued. As I looked up, a seagull flew over and pooped in my eye." The bartender said, "That's ridiculous. No one loses an eye from bird muck." The pirate finished his ale in one gulp and grimaced. "'Twas the first day with the hook." There was a man named Bob whose brain was a little loose, but in his own mind he was a great hero. One day he watched a magician on TV flying in the air. Bob immediately thought, if that guy can fly, why can't I? He shouted to his wife, Christina, "Christina, today I'll fly from our roof and land near the police corner." Christina panicked. "Bob, please don't do this. If you jump, I might become a widow today." But Bob was already standing on the edge of the roof, holding two big plastic sacks like wings. Soon the neighborhood kids gathered below, clapping and cheering. Bob looked down at a mischievous boy named Johnny and shouted, "Hey Johnny, move aside. My flight might crash on your head." Bob took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and jumped. Instead of flying, Bob dropped straight down like a broken kite and landed right into a big pile of cow dung with a loud thump. The whole street went silent. Christina ran downstairs shouting, "Oh no, my poor husband must be broken." When the dust settled, half of Bob's body was stuck inside the dung pile, with only his legs sticking out and shaking in the air. Christina nervously asked, "Bob, are you okay?" Bob slowly pulled his head out, took a deep breath, and calmly said, "Christina, I actually was flying, and my speed was like an airplane. The only problem is this stupid ground suddenly came in my way." Little Johnny stepped closer and asked, "So, Uncle Bob, when is your next flight?" There was an American man who lived in Thailand, and when he was there, he had a lot of sex and never used a condom the entire time. Then he returned to America, and one morning he woke up and noticed bright green and purple dots on his penis. Freaked out, he went to the doctor. The doctor said, "I have never seen anything like this before. We will need to run some tests." So they ran some tests, and he said, "Come back in 3 days for your test results." The man came back in 3 days, and the doctor said, "I have some bad news. You have a disease called Pongolian HP. It is very uncommon here, and we know little about it. I'm sorry, but we will need to amputate your penis." The man was horrified. He went back to Thailand to see a Thai doctor, thinking he would know more about it. The doctor said, "Oh yes, Pongolian HP, very rare, yes," said the Thai doctor. "The American doctor wants to amputate my penis," the man said. "Stupid American doctor, make more money that way, no amputation." "Oh, thank God," said the man. Then the Thai doctor said, "Wait 2 weeks, it will come off by itself." A newly married couple arrived home from their honeymoon and moved into the upstairs 2057 apartment that they had rented from the groom's parents. That night, the father of the groom was woken up by his wife. "Listen, Tony," she whispered. He listened and heard the sound of the bed upstairs creaking in rhythm. The wife said, "Come on, Tony, let's make love." So Tony climbed on top of his wife and they had sex. 15 minutes later, just as he was trying to fall back to sleep, the bed upstairs began creaking in rhythm again. "Come on, Tony," purred his insatiable wife. "Let's do it again." Tony grabbed a broom, pounded on the ceiling, and yelled, "Cut it out, kids! You're killing your old man down here!" A 75-year-old woman sat at the bar in Rusty Anchor's tavern, waiting for her husband. As she sipped her wine, a strikingly handsome man walked in, radiating confidence. He took a seat a few stools down, and she couldn't help but notice how attractive he was, so much so that she found herself staring. After a moment, the man caught her eye. With a charming smile, he stood and approached her. Before she could apologize for staring, he leaned in and with a smooth, velvety voice said, "I'll do anything you want, anything you can imagine, no matter how wild or unusual. I'll make it happen. All I ask is $50 in cash, and there's one more condition." Still in shock, she managed to ask, "What's the condition?" He smiled knowingly and leaned closer. "You have to tell me what you want in just 3 words." The woman paused, her mind racing. Then, with a calm expression, she reached into her purse, pulled out $50, and placed it in his hand. Looking him straight in the eye with a sly grin, she slowly said, "Mow my lawn." A man was down on his luck and in desperate need of a job. He saw an advertisement in the newspaper for a job in sales. He didn't know anything about sales, but figured he could learn, so he contacted the company. "It's very simple," said the hiring manager. "You go door to door selling toothbrushes. Everyone needs a toothbrush. You should be able to sell lots of them." The man agreed and went out to a large housing tract for the day. When he returned to the office, he was asked how his day went. "I sold 1 toothbrush," he said. The hiring manager was not happy. "Look, I know it's your first day in sales, so I'll forgive it this time, but you have to sell more than 1 if you want to keep your job." The next day, the man went to another neighborhood. When he returned to the office at the end of the day, he said, "I sold 2 toothbrushes today." Now the hiring manager was furious. "It is far from enough. You have 1 more day to get this right. If you don't sell a lot more tomorrow, you're fired." When the man came back to the office at the end of the next day, he was again asked how he did. "I sold 1,500 toothbrushes," he announced. "Oh my God," said the hiring manager. "That's amazing. It's more than anyone has ever sold in 1 day before. How did you do it?" "Well," he began, "I went to a grocery store and set up a table outside with some chips and some dip, and I asked people to try them. They would taste it and say, 'This dip tastes like shit.' And I would say, 'It is. Would you like to buy a toothbrush?'" An older, white-haired man walked into a jewelry store one Friday night with a beautiful young girl by his side. He told the jeweler he wanted a special ring for his girlfriend. The jeweler looked through his stock and found a $5,000 ring. The old man said, "No, I would like to see something special." The jeweler went to his special stock in the safe and brought another ring back. This one's $40,000. The young woman's eyes were sparkling and her whole body trembled with excitement. The old man said, "I'll take it." The jeweler asked how payment would be made, and the old man said, "By check, but I know you need to make sure my check is good. I'll write it now, and you can call the bank on Monday to verify the funds. I'll pick up the ring on Monday afternoon." On Monday morning, the jeweler from the jewelry store called the old man and said, "There is no money in that account." The old man said, I know, but let me tell you about the weekend I just had." Settled in, he sees a strikingly beautiful woman boarding. To his delight, she takes the seat beside him. Eager to strike up a conversation, he says, "Business trip or holiday?" She smiles and says, "Business, the annual sex convention in New York." The man swallows hard. Struggling to maintain his composure, he asks, "What's your role at the convention then?" "Lecturer," she responds. "I use my experience to debunk some of the popular myths about sexuality." "Really?" the man says. "What myths are those?" "Well," the woman explains, "one popular myth is that African men are the best endowed, when in fact it's the Native American Indians. Another misconception is that Frenchmen are the world's best lovers, when in fact men of Jewish descent are the best in bed. We have, however, found that the best overall lovers are the rednecks from the southern USA." Suddenly, the woman becomes a little uncomfortable and blushes. "I'm really sorry," she says. "I shouldn't really be discussing this with you. I don't even know your name." "Tonto," the man says. "Tonto Goldstein, but my friends call me Bubba."